أهلا بكم مشاهدينا في حوارات السياق. يزور المستشار الألماني السعودية والإمارات وقطر في جولة للمنطقة تستغرق يومين. وقال متحدث باسم الحكومة الألمانية إن الجولة ستركز من بين ملفات كثيرة على ألمانيا كوجهة للاستثمار. للمزيد من المتابعة ينضم إلينا من برلين الدكتور إيكارت ويرتز مدير معهد جيجا لدراسات الشرق الأوسط. دكتور إيكارت، مرحبا بك معنا.
Thanks for having me.
دعنا نبدأ بأهداف الزيارة في هذا التوقيت.
Well, I think there are three major issues. One, of course, is energy. Right now, in the wake of the Russian attack on Ukraine, Germany is very much worried about energy supplies, in particular of natural gas, but also of oil. Secondly, there's, of course, the long-run cooperation. I think there's great interest in imports of German machinery and other technological products. And there's a considerable potential for collaboration in fields like renewable energies, production of green hydrogen, kind of future energies that do not provide immediate relief to the current energy crisis, but can be very important solutions in the middle run in 5 to 20 years. And I think that will play a role as well. And finally, then there are the more contentious issues, human rights issues like labor rights ahead of the soccer WM in Qatar that is very prominent in the German debate. And that doesn't relate to the Emirates, but to Saudi Arabia. The murder of Mr. Khashoggi in the consulate in Istanbul still looms large in the European debate. But overall, compared to the energy picture and the economic cooperation, I think these issues will rank less prominently.
هل هناك نية لتصحيح مسار العلاقة مع السعودية بعد التوترات التي شابتها خلال السنوات الأخيرة الماضية؟
Well, you have to understand Germany has a very restrictive arms export policy. It's quite different from France or the US or the UK in that regard. At the same time, it's quite a big arms exporter, but mainly to NATO countries. And until 2014, when it delivered Milan anti-tank weapons to the Kurdish Peshmerga against the Islamic State, it didn't really provide lethal weapons. More recently now to Ukraine. But there's a certain reluctance to provide lethal weapons to Saudi Arabia because of the Yemen war. But it's not just Saudi Arabia. There is a general stance of German arms export industry or policy. Having said that, of course, Saudi Arabia might see that differently, but it is a policy that is not only applied to Saudi Arabia.
أود أن أسألك في هذا الخصوص عن التهديد الذي تمثله ميليشيا الحوثي للسعودية بدعم من إيران.
Well, the Yemen conflict doesn't loom as large in the German debate like the conflicts in Libya or in Syria. Quite simply and frankly, because it doesn't produce refugees that come to Europe, right? So it's kind of a conflict that is far removed and a bit far away from Germany. And Germany probably also doesn't have this kind of interventionist great power strategic culture like France, the UK, or the US, and is kind of prefers to stay on the sideline. Is my impression.
لكن ألمانيا ليست على الحياد كما ذكرت، هي حتى لا تتفهم أن هناك حربا بالوكالة في المنطقة والتهديد الذي تواجهه السعودية والإمارات.
Well, like it is a war going on. Germany has the policy, apart from some exceptions like Ukraine, not to develop lethal land-based weapons to conflict zones. So there is a certain disinclination, and it would be a very tough sale in the German public debate. On the other hand, there might be some compromise, but I doubt that Germany will be as proactive in terms of arms deliveries like other Western countries.
باعتقادك ما الذي تتطلع ألمانيا إلى تقديمه لدول الخليج وما الذي يفترض أن تقدمه دول الخليج لها؟ دعنا نتحدث عن كل دولة على حدة. نبدأ بالسعودية مثلا.
Well, look, Germany has banked on cheap Russian natural gas. It received 55% of its supplies from Russia before the Ukraine war. That was clearly a big strategic mistake, that they regret very dearly right now. And now they rush to build an infrastructure for LNG imports, which they did not have before. And possible suppliers of such liquefied natural gas is above all, of course, Qatar, but possibly also the UAE, as its natural gas supply picture is much better than a decade ago. Other candidates here, of course, or probably the most important supplier would be the United States. But having said that, all of these countries altogether will not be able to substitute Russian supplies that are not coming anymore.
زيارة شولتز إلى قطر تأتي بعد أشهر من زيارة وزير اقتصاده التي كان يفتش خلالها عن بديل للغاز الروسي. هل هذا يعني أن الزيارة الأولى فشلت؟
Well, so far there are no concrete deals, right? We will need to wait. But yes, Germany is a bit in a rush. At the same time, it seems to be reluctant to offer long-term supply deals, that the Qataris are interested, of course, because it has this vision that there will be a stronger energy transition towards renewables, so it doesn't want to lock in too much reliance on hydrocarbons. So I'm not privy to the discussions, but I assume such negotiations are ongoing. And we will need to see whether any concrete deals are coming out of it or might be announced on the occasion of such a visit.
لماذا ألمانيا تبدو بعيدة عن العالم العربي؟ تتكرر زيارات المسؤولين الغربيين من فرنسا وبريطانيا وإيطاليا، ونسمع عن صفقات للسلاح والطائرات، لكن ليس هناك الكثير من الحضور الألماني في الدول العربية، حتى الثقافي منه.
That is not true, right? There are Goethe institutes in major Arab capitals, in Cairo, in Damascus, I'm sure in the Gulf countries as well. There are political foundations operating in the Arab countries that, for example, manage exchange programs, training programs, and so on. There are German schools, for example, the German school in Cairo is quite well known. So it's not absent, right? But having said that, of course, we are farther away than Mediterranean countries like France or Italy. And yes, you've mentioned it, Germany does not have a colonial history in the MENA region. That can be an advantage, of course. There's less baggage in the bilateral relationship with the region. On the other hand, it also means that we do not have such vested and established interests like other countries like France, for example. And given the geographical location of Germany and its history, it's much more rooted or the view towards the east, towards Eastern Europe, but also Russia is, of course, much more important than, let's say, for countries like France and Spain. Having said that, don't underestimate the interest of Germany in the MENA region. Just to give you an example, the Union for the Mediterranean that is residing in Barcelona and is a international organization by the MENA countries and the EU countries. Initially, France wanted to have that more like a bilateral club under the leadership of France, and Germany insisted on making it a European initiative. So there is an interest in Germany to cultivate relations with the region bilaterally, but also within a European framework. Because Germany, partly because of its history, has an interest to tread carefully and not to cause anxiety with its neighbors, but also to be conscious what aggressive foreign policy can lead to. And that might be one of the reasons.
لكن هناك من سيجادلك هنا. لا تبدو ألمانيا حذرة عند التعامل مع الملفات الأمنية المتعلقة بالدول العربية، مثلا ملف الإخوان وحزب الله المصنفين تنظيمات إرهابية في عدد من الدول العربية بينها الإمارات والسعودية التي يزورها شولتز.
Well, Europe has been on the receiving end of Islamist terror like Al-Qaeda or like the Islamic State So we are very much aware of that threat, and we are tackling it, and we are grateful for cooperation, for example, with Gulf countries in that regard. Having said that, the word or the what is terrorism, right, is sometimes used in a very wide sense. So political parties with a conservative Muslim agenda would not necessarily qualify as terrorists within the political discourse in Europe. Having said that, you've mentioned some of the organizations like Hamas that are being qualified as terrorist organizations. Also because of course of their military activities, not just their political activities.
زيارة المستشار الألماني لن تشمل مصر رغم أنها باتت أحد موردي الغاز بعد اتفاقها مع إسرائيل. هل الاتفاق الأوروبي المصري الإسرائيلي الموقع قبل شهر ضمن الحد الأقصى من الإنتاج لهذين البلدين؟
Egypt is in the middle run not a large supplier of natural gas. Yeah, it even turned a gas net importer a few years back and required emergency LNG deliveries from Qatar. It has now made a discovery a few years back, the Alsyaaq, the gas field, so it's in a better position. It has a modest exportable surplus, but in terms of size, it is no comparison to countries like Qatar or maybe Algeria, should it develop its unconventional gas resources, or the US. So in that sense, also you need to see, Egypt has a growing population. It's a large country. They need a lot of their natural gas themselves. Yeah? So it can be an addition to natural gas supplies of Europe at the moment. I don't think that it is seen as a major supplier in the middle and long run. The Israelis might have some more potential.
برغم ذكرك في البداية لأهداف كثيرة للزيارة، أنت الآن تختصرها في الغاز والطاقة، أليس كذلك؟
Well, certainly energy issues are very much a priority at the moment. Yeah? Also because there's an oil embargo coming against Russia, so we will see a diversion of oil trade flows. Russia is delivering more oil at a discount to established markets of the GCC countries in Asia, like India and China. So it's crowding out oil deliveries from the Gulf there. And at the same time, the Europeans are in need of Gulf supplies, as they will have less or no supplies from Russia. As a result, we see a bit of a merry-go-round in the oil market. Russia delivering more stuff to Asia, the GCC countries less so, but more to Europe going ahead.
بمناسبة حديثك عن الجزائر، أود أن أسألك لماذا توترت العلاقة بين الجزائر وألمانيا؟ كنت ذكرت أن برلين حذرة في التعامل مع المسائل السياسية. كيف استفزت إذن الجزائر؟
Well, there is this contentious issue of the Western Sahara, which Morocco considers part of its territory, but which it is not according to international law. And Germany typically has pursued a stance of pursuing international law in that regard. Recently, we have seen some moves of European countries like Spain more towards the Moroccan position. Germany was generally a bit more reluctant in that regard, but clearly the situation between Algeria and Morocco at the moment is quite tense, and it's hard to please both sides, and it's very easy to offend each side, no matter what you do, right? So it's a very tricky and delicate diplomatic issue.
أود أن أسألك في الأخير عن الاقتصاد الألماني، كيف وضعه الآن في ظل توقعات بإغلاق بعض المصانع لأبوابها في الشتاء المقبل؟
We will need to see, right? Industrial processes that depend on natural gas might face challenges. We will need to see that. It depends really on alternative supplies. It depends on how cool the weather will be. The gas storage, the storage facilities are at 90% right now, so there's a good chance that Germany can sail through the winter also by saving natural gas consumption. For example, replacing it with other sources of energy as far that is possible. We will need to see how that plays out. Generally, I tend to be optimistic, but it will be a challenge this winter. There's no doubt about it. How will be the situation? Well, not just in Germany, right? There is considerable inflation Many economists expect a recession coming up. And probably one will need to see also how the German export-led growth model of the past will be recalibrated and reoriented as a result of that. Also, what is on the mind of many people is already the next step, the very strong reliance on Chinese export markets, but also reliance on imports of raw materials or intermediate goods from China for industrial processes. All these issues are being discussed. We see a general trend of sort of deglobalization, economic bloc building, nearshoring or friendshoring. So we might see, for example, some German companies rather outsourcing or sourcing certain labor-intensive processes to North Africa or Eastern Europe than Asian countries far away, because such value chains even suffered before the Ukraine war as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
دكتور إيكارت ويرتز، شكرا للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
Thank you very much for having me.
مشاهدينا، شكرا لطيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.